I was standing on my parents' porch on Christmas Eve, with two heavy gift bags cutting into my fingers, when my sister Brianna filled the doorway and told me they were keeping it family only this year, as if I weren't part of that word. The night air stung my cheeks, and the pine wreath behind her smelled like a memory I wasn't allowed to keep. She didn't invite me in, just crossed her arms and waited. Through her shoulder I could see the tree lights blinking in the living room, soft and warm, like a house pretending not to hear a knock. I tightened my grip on the handles until the ribbon bit my palm. My mother's silhouette hovered in the hall, my father moved a casserole from one counter to another, and the whole scene felt rehearsed. There was a long moment where I thought, if I say I did my best this year, someone will step forward. No one did. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever had to hold your ground with family, tap that like and subscribe so we can keep each other company through stories that don't always have easy answers. My name is Marina, oldest of two daughters, who grew up in a small cape with a squeaky back door and a yard where my father taught us to rake in long, even rows. When you learn to do a simple job with care, he'd say, you don't lose yourself when life gets loud. I took that to heart. I stayed local, put myself through community college, and worked my way into hospital administration, the kind of job that doesn't make headlines but keeps a lot of people moving in the right direction. The work taught me patience and numbers and how to solve what's in front of me before the next crisis rings, and I carried those habits home. My parents raised us to share, to bring a hot dish when someone was having a hard week, to write thank you notes in our own hand, and I liked that about our family. I liked being useful, even when no one noticed. Brianna noticed when it made life easier. She was always the bright one, in a room quick with photos and plans, and a dozen new ideas for next month, married young to Trent, who could turn a conversation into a promise, and a promise into a reason it couldn't happen just yet. They moved faster than their paychecks, and there were seasons when a car repair or field trip fee landed on my phone at dinner time with a soft apology and a please, and I'd send what I could. I told myself it mattered, that keeping the twins' world steady was the right thing. It felt good to help until helping started to feel like a bill that arrived without an envelope. Even then I figured it was a phase, the kind of rough patch you outgrow if you keep showing up and act like everything will turn. The older I got, the more I noticed how different the rooms felt. At the hospital, I live in spreadsheets and schedules and the quiet logic of systems. At home, holidays turned into glossy photos and running jokes about whose gift pile could hide a small dog. I'm not allergic to nice things, but I was raised to check the tag twice and keep the receipt, and somewhere along the way, it started to seem like my steadiness wasn't the kind of story anyone wanted to post. I bought what I could within reason: sweaters, books, a science kit for the twins, a gift card for my parents' favorite diner, and wrapped everything in the same plaid, paper-careful corners, neat tape, a small bow. I didn't think generosity needed a spotlight. I just wanted to walk in, put the bags by the tree, and sit near the heat vent with a plate of ham and scalloped potatoes like we did when the world felt simple. Instead, I stood on that porch with the wreath scratching the glass and my sister drawing a line I didn't understand. People say a moment comes out of nowhere, but most moments arrive on a road we don't see because we're busy carrying things. I should have asked then and there what made me unwelcome, what had changed. I should have set the bags down and taken a breath. Instead, I nodded and turned the way you turn when something hurts and you need the car to hold you together for a minute. The gifts slid onto the front passenger seat, and the ribbon left a faint mark on my palm that smarted all the way home. In the quiet of my kitchen, under the hum of the refrigerator, I realized what I couldn't shake wasn't the cold. It was the way my parents had looked past me, like it was easier than meeting my eyes. That's when I decided the next words I heard about me would not be spoken over a threshold. I don't know how long I sat with my coat still on keys, face up on the table, listening to the old clock in the hall. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon from the loaf I'd baked that morning, now cooling under a towel like it was waiting for a table that no longer had my chair. I thought about my father's rakes in neat rows, about my mother's habit of wrapping leftovers twice, so nothing leaked, about the difference between taking care and being taken for granted. Some decisions arrive loudly. Mine came as a steadying. I would not guess at the reason I would not let it calcify into a story I told myself in the dark. I would ask. I would drive back, leave the bags in the car, and step through that door with my voice belonging to me. And when Brianna looked up from her phone and told me I should have done more, that being there was about what I spent and not who I was, I would hear every word. I didn't knock when I went back that night. The porch light was still on snow gathering at the edge of the steps, my own footprints half filled from earlier. The front door opened with the same soft creak I'd known since high school. My mother and father were on the couch, voices low, as if they'd been waiting for someone to say what they couldn't. Brianna was stretched out across the cushions, phone in hand, one ankle crossed over the other like she owned the place. She barely looked up when I walked in. I stood there, just long enough for everyone to register the sound of the door closing behind me. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice even. "Why am I not welcome here? What did I do?" Brianna finally glanced up from her screen, a slow smirk curving across her mouth. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said. "You've been slacking off." I blinked at her, unsure I'd heard right. "Slacking off," I repeated. "The kids barely got anything from you this year," she went on like she was reading a report card out loud. "It's embarrassing, Marina. Last year you did more. This year you're cutting corners." For a second, the words didn't make sense. I thought about the gifts still in my car, the board games, the sweaters, the book sets she said the twins wanted. "I spent hundreds," I said quietly. "There's more in the car right now than anyone else is getting." She gave a small, dismissive laugh. "Last year you did more." I looked to my mother, searching for even a flicker of support, but she only lifted one shoulder as if the moment was too awkward to choose a side. My father shifted on the couch, pretending to check the thermostat. The air in the room thinned until I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. That was when I realized no one was going to step in. They were letting her rewrite the meaning of generosity while I stood there trying to understand why. I told myself not to cry. I told myself this was just another one of her moods. But as I turned toward the door, the word she'd used, loser, echoed again in my head, sharper now. Outside, the wind cut across my face. The same snow I'd brushed from my boots an hour earlier was falling again, faster this time, sticking to the windshield before I could start the car. I sat there in the quiet, staring at the house, waiting for the lights in the window to flicker, for someone, anyone, to come out after me. No one did. The drive home was short, but it stretched like an old film reel. I couldn't stop replaying every word she'd said, every small moment that suddenly meant something different. I'd spent years helping her and Trent rent payments, car repairs, new school clothes for the twins, even that ridiculous startup fund for Trent's business idea that never went anywhere. Each time I told myself I was doing what family does. Family helps, family shows up. And now the 1 year I didn't go overboard. I was standing in my car under the glow of my dashboard, realizing I'd been disinvited from my own family's holiday because my giving didn't meet their expectations. I pressed my palms against the steering wheel and sat until the heater finally caught up to the cold. The street outside was quiet, empty, the kind of silence that makes you think too clearly. For years I'd made excuses for Brianna's tone, her small digs her way of making me feel like everything I did was either too much or not enough. I used to believe she was just stressed, that she'd thank me later. But in that moment, something settled in a place that had been uneasy for a long time. It wasn't about gifts or money. It was about power, hers over mine, and my role in letting it stand. The next morning came gray and brittle, the kind of December light that makes everything look smaller. I made coffee and stared at the phone on the counter, half expecting the family group text to light up with some last-minute apology. Nothing came. Noon passed, then evening. Not one call. I told myself I didn't care, but the truth was I kept glancing at the phone like it might change its mind. I thought about the times Brianna called me crying once when their rent was overdue, once when Trent's car had broken down on the way to his latest opportunity, once when the kids needed laptops and she couldn't afford both. I never asked how they ended up short again. I just fixed it. Now it hit me how many times I'd told myself it was temporary. How many times I'd looked the other way when Trent bragged about working from home, though no one seemed to know what he actually did. I went over every instance in my head, the wired rent money, the new tires, the school uniforms, the camp deposits. And behind each one, I could see Brianna's voice, soft and helpless at first, then expectant. The gratitude had faded years ago. Somewhere along the way, my help had turned into her habit. That night, as the city lights blurred against the falling snow, I made a decision I didn't announce to anyone. No more checks, no more quick transfers, no more rescuing them from bills that had nothing to do with me. If they thought I'd stopped caring, so be it. I'd spent too many years confusing their silence for peace. This time I wanted real quiet, the kind that came from being left alone. The holidays rolled on without a word from them. I saw their smiling photos online, the same tree I'd seen through the doorway, the kids in matching pajamas. My parents were there smiling too. My name wasn't mentioned in any caption. When New Year's Eve came, I stayed home, made soup, watched the clock flip from 11:59 to midnight, and told myself this was just another night on the calendar. But the truth settled differently. I was alone, and they were fine with that. The ache wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull and steady, like something I'd carried too long without realizing how heavy it had become. By the second week of January, I started noticing how quiet peace could be when it wasn't laced with guilt. My phone barely rang, and for once I didn't jump when it did. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, and read before bed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Still, part of me knew that silence wouldn't last forever. Brianna never let distance stay distance for long. She always found a way to make her problems sound urgent again. It was a Tuesday evening when the knocking started, sharp, impatient, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. I was stirring a pot of pasta when I realized it wasn't the doorbell, but fists against the door. When I opened it, Brianna was there, her coat half-zipped, cheeks flushed from the cold, Trent behind her, with his hands shoved in his pockets. She brushed past me before I could say a word. The scent of her perfume filled the hallway. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't move. "Nice to see you too," I said softly, closing the door. She turned, eyes flashing. "You've made your point, Marina, but this is getting ridiculous. The kids barely have what they need. Trent's been doing everything he can." I let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Everything he can. Last I heard, he was still between jobs and working on something big. Trent's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. Brianna's tone sharpened. "This isn't about him. This is about you. You've always helped before, and now you think you're too good for your own family." I crossed my arms. "No. I've decided I'm done being treated like a bank. Big difference." Her face went pink, and her voice dropped lower, quieter but sharper. "You think you're punishing me, but you're really punishing the kids." That one hit where she aimed, but I didn't show it. "The kids are your responsibility," I said. "Yours and Trent's, not mine." Trent shifted, looking anywhere but at me. "We're just asking for a little help until things get better." How many times have I heard that exact line? I said. Things don't get better. They just get more expensive. Brianna's eyes glistened for a moment, though she hid it quickly. "You've changed," she snapped. "You used to care about this family. Now you're selfish." The word hung in the air between us like frost. I took a step closer so she couldn't miss a word. "You called me a loser in front of our parents because I didn't spend enough on your kids. You think that's caring? You think that's love?" Her jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. "Here's the truth," I said quietly. "I'm done financing your life. If you want more, earn it. If you can't, figure it out. But don't come here expecting me to fix it." The silence stretched heavy and final. Then she turned, yanking the door open hard enough to rattle the frame. Trent followed without a word. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving the faint scent of her perfume and the sound of the wind pressing against the windows. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space they'd left. Something told me it wasn't over. Not yet. When the front door closed behind Brianna and Trent that night, the house went so still that I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from across the room. Their voices still echoed in the air, tangled with the word selfish that Brianna had thrown like it was a label I'd earned. I stayed where I was for a while, hands resting on the edge of the counter. Not angry exactly, just hollow. Outside, snow was falling again, brushing against the kitchen window, melting in slow trails that caught the light from the porch. I thought about following them, chasing down one more argument that would change nothing. Instead, I turned off the lights and let the quiet fill every space they'd just left. The next few days blurred together. The phone didn't ring not once and no messages came through. Even my parents stayed silent. I half expected Mom to call with her soft, diplomatic tone, offering some excuse for Brianna's behavior, but she didn't. The silence had its own weight. I went to work, came home, and did the small things that kept my life moving. Every night I told myself this distance was exactly what I wanted. But in the still moments, pouring coffee in the morning, folding laundry at night, I kept hearing Brianna's voice sharp and certain, as if she'd decided I was the villain in a story I didn't recognize. By the second week of January, the air around Boston felt different. The holiday glow was gone, replaced by a dull gray that hung over everything. The city looked like it was waiting for something to thaw. One morning before work, I stood at the kitchen window with my mug and realized the peace I'd been trying to build had another name: loneliness. Not the kind that begs for company, but the kind that sits quietly and asks what happens next. I had no answer for that yet. I tried to fill the time with structure: morning runs, long shifts at the hospital, small projects around the apartment. Every task helped me forget, at least for a little while. I didn't talk about what happened with anyone. It felt too strange to explain that my sister had locked me out of Christmas because I hadn't spent enough. The story sounded ridiculous when I said it in my head, like something that couldn't possibly be real. But it was real. Every small silence proved it. A few evenings later, I found myself at the grocery store, staring at a display of Valentine's decorations that had gone up too early. It hit me how fast the world keeps moving, even when your life feels paused. The checkout clerk asked if I had family nearby, just making conversation, and I nodded automatically before realizing I didn't know how to define nearby anymore. I went home that night and sat at the table with a bowl of soup, the kind you make for one person and eat slowly. Somewhere between spoonfuls, a thought surfaced that I hadn't let myself admit. Before, Brianna wasn't punishing me for not helping. She was punishing me for stopping. Once that truth settled, it explained everything. The insults, the silence, the way she'd shown up at my door pretending her demands were concern. She couldn't stand losing control. For the first time in years, I'd changed the rhythm, and she didn't know how to dance to it. Another week passed before anything broke the routine. I was halfway through cleaning the kitchen one Tuesday evening when a sharp knock startled me. It wasn't the light, polite kind of knock you give a neighbor. It was steady, urgent, the sound of someone who'd decided they wouldn't leave without being heard. My chest tightened. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. When I did, there was no one there. Instead, a white envelope had been slipped under the mat. My name was written in Brianna's handwriting, all loops and confidence. I brought it inside, stared at it for a moment, then set it unopened on the counter. I didn't need to read it to know the tone, half accusation, half guilt. I left it there for 2 days before I finally opened it. The letter was short. "You're making things harder than they need to be," she wrote. "The kids miss you. We all do. You've proven your point. Can we please stop this now?" Beneath the words was something smaller in pen. "We could use your help, just until things get better." I folded the paper and set it aside. For a long time, I stood at the sink running the tap without washing anything. I wasn't angry, just tired. This wasn't a peace offering. It was a lure, the promise of affection if I returned to my old role. The problem was I knew what came next if I did. The requests, the guilt, the feeling of being loved only when I was useful. The following Sunday, my parents called for the first time in weeks. It was my mother's voice on the line, careful and cautious. "Honey, Brianna's been under a lot of stress," she began. "Trent's work situation hasn't improved. Maybe you could—" I cut her off gently. "I can't, Mom. Not this time." There was a pause, a quiet sigh, and then she said, "Family needs to stick together." I wanted to remind her that I'd been sticking for years, that I'd done it until it broke me, but there was no point. I told her I hoped they were all okay, and when we hung up, the silence in my apartment felt steadier than her voice had sounded. A few nights later, the silence broke for good. I was halfway through a simple dinner, pasta and salad, when the pounding started at the door. This time there was no envelope, no pretense. I knew the rhythm of that knock too well. I opened the door to see Brianna again, cheeks flushed, hair pulled back, a storm in her eyes. Trent hovered behind her, avoiding my gaze. Before I could speak, she brushed past me. "We need to talk," She said the same words she'd used before. The smell of her perfume filled the hallway. I stood still waiting. She turned, her voice already rising. "You've made your point, Marina, but this is getting ridiculous. The kids barely have what they need. Trent's trying his best, but you're making everything harder." Her voice trembled slightly, but not from apology. It was frustration. I crossed my arms, letting her words fall. When I didn't answer, she pushed harder. "You think this is about money? It's about family. You've always helped before, and now you're acting like we don't matter." I met her eyes. "I never said you don't matter. I just said I can't keep paying for your mistakes." Trent shifted behind her, muttering something about how times are tough, and Brianna turned on him with a glare. It was the first crack I'd seen in her composure. "You used to care," she said, her voice lower now, almost pleading. "Now you're cold. You've changed." I took a slow breath. Maybe. But maybe I just stopped pretending everything was fine. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the heater. Then she said it again, quieter this time, almost like a weapon she didn't believe in anymore. "You're selfish." The word hung between us until it lost its edge. I didn't respond. She turned toward the door, pulling it open hard enough to make the frame shudder. Trent followed without looking back. The wind swept in, cold and sharp, before the door closed behind them. I stood there watching the shadows of their car fade down the street. The air felt thinner but lighter, too. Something inside me shifted in that silence, not a victory, but a kind of release. I knew Brianna well enough to know she wouldn't let it rest. Whatever came next would find its way to my doorstep soon enough. I just didn't expect it to arrive in the form of a phone call from someone I'd never met. 2 days after Brianna and Trent stormed out of my house, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something about the persistence made me answer. "This is Marina," I said. A man's voice came through, calm and professional. "Good morning, Ms. Cole. My name is Miles Turner. I'm an attorney here in Boston. I represent a client who has concerns about certain financial matters involving your family. Do you have a moment to discuss?" The words, "financial matters," pulled every muscle in my shoulders tight. "Financial matters," I repeated, already uneasy. "I'm not sure what you mean." He hesitated just long enough to sound deliberate. "It involves monetary contributions you've made to your sister Brianna and her husband Trent Lawson. Specifically, how those contributions were used." I gripped the phone a little tighter. "Who exactly is your client?" I asked. There was another pause before he replied, "Your sister, Ms. Lawson." For a second, I didn't speak. The idea of Brianna hiring a lawyer to talk to me was almost surreal. Miles continued, his tone measured. "She came to me after discovering certain irregularities in her husband's financial activity. She thought you should be made aware." My mind raced through years of transfers, payments, and emergencies. "What kind of irregularities?" I asked finally. "It would be better to go over this in person," he said. "Would you be able to meet at my office tomorrow morning?" The next day, I sat across from Miles in a quiet office with dark wood shelves and neat stacks of folders. Outside, the city was muffled by snow, the kind that made Boston look softer than it really was. He slid a file across the desk toward me. "Your sister discovered a separate bank account under Trent Lawson's name," he said. "It appears to have received funds that correspond to several transfers you made to their household." I opened the folder. The statements inside looked familiar, dates, amounts, even the notes I'd written in the transfers for rent, kids' laptops, car repair. But next to each deposit, there were withdrawals that had nothing to do with family life. Hotel stays, expensive dinners online, trading platforms, electronics stores. Miles pointed to one section. "This account has no evidence of payments toward rent or utilities. The transactions suggest personal spending." I felt my chest tighten as I scanned the pages. So while I was helping them pay bills, I said quietly, "Trent was using the funds elsewhere." Miles finished gently. "Your sister didn't have access to this account until recently." She came across a statement left in his desk. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The paper blurred a little as I focused on the lines of numbers. Every transaction was a memory, one I'd tried to make generous, now turned hollow. "Does Brianna know I'm here?" I asked finally. "She does," Miles said. "She thought it was fair for you to know what's come to light." I leaned back in the chair, the weight of realization settling like cold air. Years of wiring money, dropping off checks, paying for the twins' needs, it hadn't just gone unappreciated. It had funded something entirely different. "What does she plan to do?" I asked. Miles's expression softened. "She's exploring her options. Separation is one possibility. For now, she's focused on protecting her children." I closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. "Please tell her I understand," I said quietly, "and tell her she's stronger than she thinks." When I stepped outside, the wind cut through my coat. The sidewalks were slick and every sound felt sharper than usual. I walked slowly to my car, the folder's image still clear in my mind. By the time I reached home, my phone was buzzing again, this time Trent's name flashing across the screen. I shouldn't have answered, but curiosity, or maybe instinct, made me swipe. "You've been talking to Brianna," he said without preamble. His tone was clipped angry. "She's feeding you lies." I didn't bother asking how he knew. "You mean the lies about the account with my money in it," I said. He scoffed. "She's exaggerating. It's nothing like she's making it sound." I could hear the edge in his voice, the panic under the defensiveness. "Trent, I said you hid money from your own wife. You used my help for things that had nothing to do with your kids." There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said. "No," I replied, steady now. "I understand it perfectly. You just don't like that the free ride's over." Before he could respond, I ended the call. For the first time in years, my hands trembled not from guilt, but from certainty. 2 days later, my phone lit up again, Brianna's name this time. I almost ignored it, thinking it might be another round of defensiveness or blame. But when I picked up, her voice was different, smaller. "Did Trent call you?" she asked quietly. "He did." "He's trying to make this my fault," she said. "I confronted him about the account and he admitted some of it. But he's still pretending it's nothing serious." I leaned against the counter, staring out at the gray sky beyond my kitchen window. "It's thousands of dollars, Brianna," I said. "That's not nothing." She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she finally whispered. "I've been making excuses for him for years, Marina. I didn't want to see what was right in front of me, but after Christmas, after how he treated you, I started thinking about what I've been teaching my kids." Her voice cracked on the last word. "They deserve better than this." I didn't say anything right away. There was a part of me that wanted to remind her of the night she'd called me a loser, of the look on her face when she shut the door in mine. But I also knew that something had shifted. Whatever arrogance she'd carried before had fallen away. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm talking to Miles again tomorrow," she said. "I don't know what comes next, maybe separation, maybe more. But I can't keep living like this." There was a long pause, the kind that used to mean a fight, but this time it didn't. It just meant understanding. "Whatever you decide," I said, "I've got your back. But I can't go back to how things were." "I'm not asking you to," Brianna said. "I just don't want you to give up on me completely." Her words were soft, almost fragile, and something in me eased. "I'm not," I said. "Just don't forget what you're capable of." We stayed on the phone for a while, talking about small things that didn't matter much, how the kids were doing in school, the weather, the noise of the wind outside her apartment. When we hung up, I realized the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was just quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were standing on level ground, even if it was fragile. Still, I knew how unpredictable Trent could be. If he felt control slipping, he'd find a way to pull it back. I didn't know when or how, but I could feel it coming, the kind of storm that builds before anyone sees the clouds. A week after that last phone call with Brianna, I started to believe things might settle. There were no angry messages, no sudden knocks, no updates about Trent. I went to work, came home, and let the days pass quietly. Then one Saturday morning, a text from Brianna appeared on my screen. "Can we meet, just us?" I stared at the words for a long time before replying, where she suggested a small coffee shop halfway between our homes, one with tall windows and old wooden booths that smelled faintly of cinnamon and espresso. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting near the back. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, her makeup minimal, the exhaustion clear in her eyes. She looked up when I walked in, and for the first time in years, she didn't have that sharp, confident edge to her posture. She just looked tired. "Thanks for coming," she said softly as I sat across from her. The waitress brought over 2 mugs and poured the coffee. Brianna cupped hers with both hands as if the warmth might hold her together. "I told Trent I need space," she said finally. He didn't take it well. Her voice was steady but small. I could hear the strain beneath each word. "I can't keep pretending this is normal," she continued. "The fights, the excuses, it's all I do anymore. I wake up waiting for the next lie." She looked down at her hands, fingers tightening around the cup. "I have to get out." I watched her quietly. There was no anger in me anymore, only a slow understanding of how long it had taken her to get here. "Do you have a plan?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I'm looking for a rental. Something small, something I can afford on my own. I haven't told him yet. I want to move while he's gone for his next business trip." The less time he has to interfere, the better. Her words hung between us. For a moment, the noise of the cafe, the clinking cups, the low hum of conversation faded into the background. "You mean it?" this time I asked quietly. She nodded again, eyes shining. "I do. I'm done." We sat for a long time without saying much. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, Marina, for Christmas, for how I spoke to you, for letting it get that far." I looked at her across the table. The apology felt real, not rehearsed, not defensive. "You didn't deserve that," she said. "You were the only one trying to help, and I turned it into something ugly." I took a slow breath before answering. "You can't take back what happened," I said, "but you can make sure what comes next is better." She nodded a small, grateful motion, and for the first time in years I saw a glimpse of the sister I used to know, the one who used to laugh at midnight movies and share secrets over coffee on the porch. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the beginning of something close. 3 days later, the plan was in motion. I came home from work to a call from Brianna. Her voice was hushed but determined. "He's leaving tomorrow morning," she said. "I'm moving while he's gone." I could hear movement in the background, the shuffle of boxes, the sound of tape being pulled from a roll. "Are the kids okay?" I asked. "They're excited," she said softly. "I told them we're moving somewhere with a big window for their art projects. They think it's an adventure." Her voice wavered, but she steadied it. "I just need one more thing. I hate to even ask, but I'm short on the deposit and first month's rent." I didn't hesitate. "Say no more," I said. "I'll cover it." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "Marina." "I don't want you to think this is the same as before." She said, "It's not." "I know," I said. "This time you're moving forward, not backward." By the time we hung up, I was already transferring the money. It felt different from every time before, clean, decisive. Not a rescue, but a step toward freedom. The next evening she called again, her voice lighter. "We did it," she said, breathless. "The movers came and we're out. He doesn't even know yet." I could hear the muffled laughter of the twins in the background. "Where are you?" I asked. 2 towns over," she said. "A small rental month to month. It's not fancy, but it's ours. I'll text you the address once we're settled." Later that night, she sent a photo. She and the kids sat cross-legged on the floor of their new living room, surrounded by boxes and half-eaten pizza. A small artificial Christmas tree glowed in the corner, though it was already mid-January. The caption read, "We're okay." I stared at that photo for a long time before setting my phone down. Something in me felt lighter. The calm didn't last. 2 days later, I was at work when my phone started buzzing nonstop. The calls came one after another, unknown numbers, then finally Trent's name. I didn't pick up the first time or the second. On the third, I answered. His voice came through sharp and furious. "You did this," he said. "You turned her against me. You've ruined everything." I stayed silent for a moment. Then calmly I said, "Maybe if you'd spent less time gambling with her trust and my money, she wouldn't have had to leave." There was a pause, then a rush of anger. "You think you're better than me," he snapped. "You don't know what pressure I've been under." "No," I said. "You've just been hiding from it." He started to speak again, but I ended the call before he could. I stood in the break room, phone still in my hand, staring at the reflection in the vending machine glass. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel shaken. I felt steady. That night, I got another text from Brianna. "He called you, didn't he?" "Yes," I replied. "He's angry. He'll stay that way for a while," she wrote. "But I'm not going back." A week later, I drove out to see her. The rental house sat on a quiet street lined with maples, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until dinner. The front porch was cluttered with potted plants, and I could hear the twins arguing playfully inside. When she opened the door, the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls filled the air. "You look lighter," I said as I stepped inside. She smiled, tired, but genuine. "I feel lighter." We sat at the small kitchen table, the sunlight slanting across the worn linoleum floor. The kids laughed from the living room as they colored. Brianna talked about her new part-time job at a bookstore, about the twins' new school, about how quiet the nights felt without the constant tension. At one point she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I know I said awful things to you," she said softly. "I wish I could take them back." I met her eyes. "You can't," I said, "but you can make sure next Christmas looks different." She nodded, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the kids' laughter drifted through the doorway. When I left that afternoon, the air was cold but clear, the sky pale blue above the rooftops. I got in my car and looked back at her house, the little rental with the chipped shutters and the light glowing in the window. It wasn't much, but it was peace. Driving home, I realized something had shifted in both of us. Brianna was finally standing on her own, and I had finally learned what it meant to help without losing myself in the process. But deep down, I knew Trent wasn't finished. Men like him didn't just disappear quietly. The next storm would come, I just didn't know when or what shape it would take. A month after Brianna moved into her rental, the air in Boston was finally beginning to soften. The snow had melted into slush along the curbs, and the trees were starting to show their first hints of green. I'd driven out to see her every other weekend, bringing small things she needed: a kitchen lamp, a set of towels, a slow cooker I never used. Each time I pulled up to the little house, the same feeling settled in my chest, quiet pride. The porch was always bright with sunlight, the laughter of the twins spilling through the open windows. Brianna was holding steady one day at a time. She'd found a rhythm quickly. The part-time job at the bookstore had turned into nearly full-time hours, and she'd started taking inventory work at night when the kids were asleep. Her voice sounded lighter every time we spoke, though the exhaustion was always there underneath. One afternoon I sat with her on the porch while the twins rode their bikes up and down the street. She leaned back against the railing, eyes half closed. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think I couldn't live without him. Now I can't believe how much I let him take from me." I didn't respond right away. The wind rustled the trees, and a neighbor's dog barked somewhere down the block. "You're here now," I said finally. She nodded. "That's what I keep reminding myself." For a while, life felt calm. The calls from Trent stopped. My parents had gone back to pretending everything was fine, filling our rare phone conversations with small talk about weather and errands. Then one night, just as I was about to head to bed, my phone lit up with Brianna's name. When I answered, her voice was shaking. "He knows where we are." I sat up straight. "What happened?" "He showed up," she whispered. "He's outside. I can see his car. Call the police," I said immediately. "Right now." "I already did," she said. "They're on their way." I could hear the twins in the background, confused, frightened, asking questions she was trying to answer calmly. "Stay on the phone with me," I said. I grabbed my coat and keys, not thinking about the distance. It would take me nearly 40 minutes to reach her, but I couldn't sit still. By the time I got there, the street was quiet again. A cruiser was parked near the curb, its lights flashing softly against the snowbanks. Brianna stood near the porch steps, arms wrapped around herself. One of the officers was speaking to her, while the other wrote notes on a clipboard. "He didn't come to the door," she said as I walked up. "Just sat in the car for a while." When I looked out the window, he drove off. Her voice was flat, drained of its usual strength. "They said they'll file a report, but unless he does something else, there's not much they can do." I stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," I told her. "We'll talk to Miles in the morning. He'll know what to do." The officer nodded, slightly overhearing. "If you get any more contact from him, ma'am, call us immediately. Don't open the door." After they left, we stood in the cold for a long moment before going inside. The twins were sitting on the couch, wrapped in blankets. I knelt down in front of them, trying to make my voice sound calm. "Everything's okay now," I said. "Your mom handled it." Brianna exhaled, sinking into the armchair. "He's not going to stop," she said softly. I can feel it." The next morning, we met with Miles at his office. He greeted us with that same composed, measured calm that always made me trust him. After listening to what happened, he leaned forward slightly. "This strengthens your case for separation," he said, "and for a restraining order if it continues. But we'll need to document everything." Brianna nodded, her fingers twisting in her lap. "I just want him to stay away," she said. "I don't care about anything else." Miles gave her a steady look. "You care about your kids," he said, "so you're going to do this properly." Over the next few weeks, things moved faster than I expected. Papers were filed, calls were made, and small protections started falling into place. Brianna changed her phone number, updated her work schedule, and began saving whatever she could in a new account under her name alone. I could see the difference in her eyes, cautious but determined. Then one Friday evening, I came home from work to a voicemail from Trent. His voice was slurred, angry. "You think you can take everything from me," he said. "You turned her against me. You're both going to regret this." I saved the message, then forwarded it straight to Miles. Within an hour, he replied with a short text. "Keep it. It'll help her case. Don't respond." That weekend, Brianna called to tell me she'd been approved for temporary protection. "He can't come near the house or the kids," she said, relief evident in her voice. "The police dropped off the notice today." "That's good," I said. "That's progress." "It doesn't feel real yet," she admitted, "but it's something." The following week, I stopped by her place after work. The twins were at a neighbor's and the house smelled like fresh paint. She'd spent the day covering the pale beige walls with soft green, wanting the space to feel new. "It's amazing what color can do," she said, smiling faintly. As we painted the last corner of the living room, she glanced toward the window. "I haven't felt this peaceful in years," she said quietly. "Even with everything happening, it's like I can breathe again." That night, after I drove home, I sat in my own living room thinking about how far she'd come. For the first time in years, our relationship didn't revolve around emergencies or money. We were just sisters again, two women finding their footing after a long storm. The peace lasted almost 2 weeks. Then late one evening, I got a text from Brianna. "He called my work line. He knows I'm here." I called immediately. She answered on the first ring. "He didn't say much," she whispered, "just that he's not done." Then he hung up. I could hear the tremor in her voice, but also the steadiness beneath it. "I'm calling Miles first thing in the morning," she said. "I won't let him scare me back." When I hung up, I sat there in the dim light of my kitchen phone still in my hand. There was nothing I could do that night but wait and trust that she meant what she said. The girl who used to depend on everyone else had found her strength. Outside, the city was silent, the street lights catching the edges of melting snow. I knew the next few weeks would test her resolve, maybe even mine. But something about her voice that night told me the tide had already turned. Trent could shout, threaten, and twist the story all he wanted. The hold he'd once had over her was gone. And soon he'd have no choice but to face what came next. The next few weeks unfolded with an uneasy calm, the kind that makes you second-guess whether the storm has truly passed or if it's just catching its breath. Brianna had started to look like herself again. The color was back in her cheeks, her voice carried a steadiness I hadn't heard in years, and the twins had finally begun sleeping through the night without waking up from bad dreams. On the surface, things were settling, but the silence from Trent was its own kind of warning. Then, one Tuesday morning, Brianna called while I was on my way to work. Her voice was clipped, but steady. "Miles called me," she said. "He's filing the final petition this week. It's really happening." For a moment, I could hear the disbelief underneath her words, the mix of relief and fear that comes when freedom starts to feel real. "That's good," I told her. "You're doing everything right." "I hope so," she said softly. "He's been quiet lately, but that makes me more nervous than anything." Later that week, her intuition proved right. Trent's calm cracked, and his next move came not through a confrontation but through paperwork. Miles called me one evening after work. "He's contesting the separation," he said. "He's filed claims about the finances, saying you influenced your sister to act against his interests." I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wood grain under my fingertips. "He's accusing me." "Yes," Miles said gently. "It's nothing that holds weight, but it's meant to rattle both of you. He's trying to buy time." I let out a quiet breath. He's already had years of it. Over the following days, Brianna and I exchanged calls at all hours, some about legal forms, others just to talk through the fear that still crept in at night. The lawyer reassured us that Trent's claims wouldn't stand, but the stress was heavy. Brianna kept working juggling shifts at the bookstore and the evening inventory job, determined not to give him another ounce of power. Then in late March, Miles called again. "The hearing's been scheduled for next month," he said. "Trent hasn't filed anything new, but he's been trying to contact the court directly. He's angry. I want both of you to stay alert." The words sat in my chest long after the call ended. I didn't tell Brianna right away. She'd been doing so well, and I didn't want to shake that fragile calm. But a few nights later, when she called to tell me about a strange car parked across from her house, I knew it was time. "I think it's him," she said quietly. "It's been there since dinner. No lights, no one getting out. Just sitting." "Lock the doors," I said. "Call the police again." She hesitated. "I don't want to overreact." "Bree, listen to me," I said firmly. "You're not overreacting. Just make the call." By the time officers arrived, the car was gone. They took her statement and promised extra patrols through the neighborhood, but the unease lingered. That night she called again. "The kids are fine," she said, her voice trembling. "But I don't know how much more of this I can take. You're stronger than you think," I told her. "And you're not alone." The next morning, Miles met with us both. He had already contacted the court to document the incident. "Every pattern like this builds the case for full protection," he explained. "Keep records of everything. Dates, times, even small details." Brianna nodded, clutching her pen like a lifeline. "I'm just tired of being scared," she said quietly. "I know," he said gently, "but fear is temporary. So is his control." April arrived with a chill that didn't match the calendar. The day of the hearing, Brianna stood beside Miles in the courthouse hallway, her hands folded tightly in front of her. I sat on a bench nearby, watching the way she kept her eyes fixed on the floor, refusing to look toward the door where Trent would enter. When he finally walked in, I barely recognized him. His once carefree confidence had curdled into something harder, resentful, bitter. He glanced in my direction but said nothing. The proceedings moved quickly. Miles presented every record, every statement, and every message as proof of the harassment and financial deceit that had defined their marriage. Trent tried to interrupt more than once, his voice rising, his anger spilling over in the quiet room. At one point, the judge leaned forward and spoke firmly. "Mr. Lawson, this is not a debate. The evidence speaks for itself." By the time it was over, Brianna's hands were shaking. The court granted her a full protection order and finalized the separation terms. Trent's access to shared assets was revoked, and any future contact had to go through her attorney. When the gavel struck, the sound echoed through the room like something ending for good. Outside the courthouse, Brianna leaned against the wall, her breath visible in the cold air. "It's done," she whispered. "I can't believe it's really done." Miles gave a small nod. "You've earned your peace," he said. Then he turned to me. "She's going to be okay now. But if he reaches out again, you call me directly." We watched as Trent walked across the parking lot, shoulders hunched against the wind. He didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, life started to look different. Brianna's posture changed, her steps lighter, her voice steady. The twins adjusted quickly to their new school and even brought home a flyer for a spring fair they wanted to attend. She started saving again, planning for a small car of her own. The quiet in her house wasn't fear anymore, it was freedom. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I stopped by her place with dinner. The kids were sprawled across the floor with crayons and paper, laughing. Brianna stood by the stove, stirring a pot of soup. When she turned and smiled, I could see the difference. "I forgot what it felt like to be safe in my own home," she said softly. "You built that," I told her. She nodded, glancing toward the twins. "We're still finding our way. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not waiting for something bad to happen." We ate together at the small kitchen table, the window open to let in the cool spring air. Outside, I could hear the sound of kids playing down the street, bikes clicking over pavement, dogs barking in the distance. It was the kind of ordinary evening most people take for granted. When I left later that night, Brianna walked me to the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up on me." I smiled and squeezed her hand. Just promise me you'll keep choosing yourself, every time. Driving home, the city lights shimmered against the dark river. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder. The chaos that once defined our family had lost its power. Brianna had stood up, I had let go, and Trent's noise had finally faded into the background where it belonged. Still, as I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't shake the thought that some lessons don't end with the paperwork. Healing takes time, trust takes even longer. But we were both learning slowly that freedom isn't just about what you leave behind, it's about what you finally start to build. Spring folded gently into summer, and the rhythm of our lives found a calm I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. Brianna's little rental looked different now. Curtains on the windows, potted herbs on the porch, a welcome mat that said home. The twins were thriving at their new school, bringing home art projects and stories that sounded bright and uncomplicated. When I visited on Sundays, the air inside was always filled with the smell of something baking and the easy sound of laughter. One warm afternoon, I sat at their kitchen table while Brianna packed sandwiches for a picnic. Sunlight poured through the open window, catching in her hair. "It's strange," she said, smiling faintly, "how quiet life feels now. I used to think quiet meant loneliness, but it just means peace, doesn't it?" I nodded. "It does. You earned every bit of it." She looked at me for a long moment, then reached over and squeezed my hand. "You know," she said softly, "you saved me, even when I didn't deserve it." I didn't correct her, but the truth was simpler. She'd saved herself. I just stood close enough so she wouldn't forget she could. A few days later, I went through my hall closet at home, the one where I'd stored the gift bags from that last Christmas I never got to attend. They'd sat there for months, gathering dust. I unpacked them one by one, the board games, the sweaters, the books I'd picked out so carefully. Some of it I mailed to Brianna for the kids. The rest I donated to a local shelter. When I carried the boxes to my car, I felt lighter, as if I'd finally let go of the version of myself who believed love had to be bought to be kept. Not long after that, Trent called again. His number flashed on my screen while I was paying bills, and for a heartbeat, old habits tried to surface, the instinct to answer, to reason, to fix. But I let it ring until it stopped. I didn't owe him a single word. He left a voicemail anyway, a rambling mix of anger and denial that I deleted before it ended. There was no satisfaction in it, only clarity. People like Trent lived in circles of their own making. I'd finally stepped out of his. Weeks passed quietly after that. Brianna started a savings account for the twins' future and enrolled in evening classes at a nearby community college. She told me she wanted to study accounting, something practical, something that gave her control over her own life. The way her face lit up when she said it reminded me of the girl she used to be before the world had asked too much of her. One evening, she invited me over for dinner. The twins had helped set the table with mismatched plates and paper napkins folded into triangles. After we ate, they ran off to watch a movie, while Brianna and I lingered at the table, our coffee cups cooling between us. "Do you ever think we'll be close with Mom and Dad again?" she asked. Her tone wasn't bitter, just curious. I thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe someday," I said, "but even if we're not, we'll be okay. Some distances don't need to be closed to be at peace." She nodded, and the matter settled like dust in the light quiet, undisturbed. Later that night, as I drove home under a wide, soft sky, I realized how much had changed in a single year. There was no grand revenge, no dramatic confrontation, no moment of public justice. The justice had happened quietly in boundaries, drawn in courage, found in peace, reclaimed. Brianna had her freedom. I had my voice. And the part of me that used to ache for family approval had finally gone still. The holidays came around faster than I expected. That December, Brianna and the twins came to my place for Christmas Eve. We baked cookies, played music, and opened small, simple gifts. When the twins ran off to the living room to build a blanket fort, Brianna leaned back on the couch beside me. "Remember last year," she said. "Feels like a lifetime ago." I smiled. "It does. But look at you now." She laughed softly. "Look at us." The lights from the tree reflected in the window, and for the first time in years, Christmas felt like what it was supposed to: warm, genuine, without performance or pressure. No one was keeping score, no one expecting too much. It was just family rebuilt on truth instead of obligation. As I stood at the sink, later rinsing the last of the dishes, I thought about everything that had brought us here, the slammed doors, the long silences, the phone calls that changed everything. None of it had been easy, but every hard edge had carved out something stronger in its place. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that peace doesn't always come from fixing what's broken. Sometimes it comes from walking away, letting the silence do the teaching and trusting that the right people will find their way back when they're ready. We can't always choose who sees our worth, but we can choose to stop proving it to those who never did. If you've ever had to step back to save your own heart, I hope you know that isn't selfish, it's brave, and sometimes it's the only way to make room for a better kind of love. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in you, share it with someone who might need the reminder. And take care of your peace. It's worth more than anything you could ever give away.